The National Desk, America's News Now. Now, historic and catastrophic flooding sweeping away people in the Northeast.
This is nowhere near over, and at this phase, our primary focus continues to be on life and safety before we can shift into a recovery phase.
Then, new meaning to long COVID, the new study showing how far behind students remain after pandemic learning loss. And NATO allies meet, the discussion on expanding the group and what it could mean for Ukraine.
The first time that NATO leaders will meet with 31 together, and looking forward to meeting very soon with 32 members, with the addition of Sweden.
This is the National Desk, America's News Now. I'm Eugene Ramirez, and we begin with breaking news as we come on the air. Heavy flooding continuing in the Northeast right now. Vermont Governor Phil Scott saying today the disaster is nowhere near over. Right now, parts of Vermont remain underwater as rescuers work to help people there in trouble. At least 117 people in the state were rescued as of noon today. President Biden declaring a state of emergency for Vermont this morning. Governor Scott describing that situation as, quote, historic and catastrophic.
Make no mistake, the devastation and flooding we're experiencing across Vermont is historic and catastrophic.
The rising water in a dam near the state capitol has begun to slow after Montpelier city officials warned it was reaching capacity. Over in New York, officials there still assessing damage, but the area much closer to recovery. Federal lawmakers have also asked the Army Corps of Engineers to get boots on the ground at the U.S. Military Academy, which was hit hard by these floods. Meanwhile, a severe heat wave is overtaking parts of the U.S. now, with more than 100 million people under heat alerts. The conditions threatening to shatter even more records. Areas impacted the most include Nevada, Arizona, California, New Mexico, Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, Missouri, Louisiana, and Florida. The highest temperatures are in the Southwest, with extreme heat in cities like Phoenix and Las Vegas. The heat wave expected to get worse before things get better. The heat in Miami, Florida right now, breaking several records this month. It just broke another one, reaching 96 degrees today, past the existing record of 95 for the day set in 2010. Heat advisories have been in place there since July 4th. And the White House just announced it will invest $5 million to help deal with extreme heat. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA, will establish 2 virtual research centers. The working group will develop a national heat strategy focused on equity and environmental justice. The cargo ship fire that burned for days in Newark and took the lives of 2 Newark firefighters has now been extinguished. Investigators say that they now can turn to determining the cause of the blaze. Once completed, the ship will then be broken down for scrap. President Biden met with other NATO leaders in Lithuania today for a major summit. While the members welcomed newly accepted Sweden into their ranks, the allies issued a joint statement saying that while Ukraine's future is in the alliance, they cannot offer membership now until all conditions have been met. President Biden saying they were united in their decision regarding Ukraine.
We agree on the language that we proposed, that you proposed, relative to the future of Ukraine being able to join NATO, and we're looking for continued united NATO.
Ukraine's President Vladimir Zelensky blasting that decision, writing on the messaging platform Telegram that it is absurd. There's no time frame for his country to get into NATO. President Zelensky says the longer it takes for Ukraine to be invited into the alliance, the longer Russia will continue to hurt his people. Zelensky is set to attend the NATO summit in Lithuania tomorrow. The murder trial in 4 University of Idaho students' deaths is now on hold. A judge allowing a 37-day stay in the case against Brian Kohberger. He's charged with fatally stabbing the students last year. Now, this comes after the defense asked for more time to go over grand jury materials. State prosecutors are seeking the death penalty in the case if Kohberger's convicted. The trial now scheduled to start in October. Former President Donald Trump wants to postpone the classified document trial against him. His attorneys writing in a filing that the trial should be delayed without setting a new date because of the upcoming election. They argue it will be hard to pick jurors and have a fair trial before November of 2024. The Justice Department wants a trial this December. And in Georgia, a grand jury was just sworn in to decide whether Trump or his allies should be charged for trying to overturn the 2020 election loss in that state. Now, this case involves accusations Trump called Georgia's Secretary of State state in early 2021, suggesting he could help find more than 11,000 votes, along with accusations made to state lawmakers there was widespread election fraud. Now, if Trump is indicted, he can still run for president. And a new AP NORC poll finding many Americans doubt votes will be correctly counted in the upcoming presidential election next year. Only 22% of Republicans have high confidence that votes will be counted accurately. And compare that to 71% of Democrats. 44% of Americans have a great deal or quite a bit of confidence in the accuracy of vote counting. Over to Capitol Hill now, the Select Subcommittee on the Coronavirus Pandemic holding a new hearing on the proximal origins of COVID-19, alleging that politics altered the science behind how it all got started.
We're examining whether government officials, regardless of who they are, unfairly and perhaps biasly tipped the scales toward a preferred origin theory.
Now, two witnesses, Dr. Kristen Anderson and Dr. Robert Gray, refuted the notion and said that their interest in writing a peer-reviewed paper suggesting a natural origin of the virus was backed by the data they had at the time, leading Democrats to call the hearing pure political theater.
This isn't about building trust in public health and science, no. It's about tearing it down, about manufacturing a problem and manufacturing distrust to justify an extreme partisan agenda.
Now, a story that's rocked the sports world, taking center stage in Congress, lawmakers grilling PGA executives on its pending merger with Live Golf, which is financed by Saudi Arabia. The National Desk Entre Al Nashar reports on the concerns on Capitol Hill that stretch far beyond golf.
Preserving an American institution. That's the stated goal of both the PGA and lawmakers on the Senate Homeland Security Committee. How to do that is where they diverge. After a year of legal disputes and players leaving their tour, PGA claims they have no choice but to try to finalize a merger with Live Golf, which is funded by Saudi Arabia.
They're already putting billions of dollars into golf. They've got a management team that wants to destroy the tour.
Many in the golf world, like Rory McIlroy,
I still hate Live. Like, I hate Live.
Deeply uncomfortable with associating with Saudi Arabia and its suspected attempts to quote-unquote sports wash its record of human rights abuses and alleged connections to the 9/11 attacks. Concerns felt beyond the sports realm. Democratic Senator Richard Blumenthal.
We're concerned about the PGA Tour's deal in terms of what it means for an authoritarian government to use its wealth to capture American institutions.
The PGA pushing back on those worries, claiming they'd have control of any new subsidiary. Republican members of the committee joined Democrats in concerns about potential antitrust issues, but given the early stage of merger negotiations, some of them argue Congress should stay out of it.
There's nothing wrong with the PGA Tour negotiating its survival.
Though a PGA Live merger would transform professional golf, U.S.-Saudi business ties are nothing new. In fact, on its website, the American embassy and consulates in Saudi Arabia say investment, trade, and other commercial activities form a vital pillar between the countries, and they're committed to supporting U.S. companies doing business with the kingdom. The PGA executives say they'll cooperate with antitrust regulators, and those watching this closely say that's where PGA and Live could hit their biggest snag if those regulators determine their merger would create an illegal monopoly. In Washington, I'm Entre Al Nashar for the National Desk, America's News Now.
Developing now, officials watching houses in California in a neighborhood there after a landslide destroyed at least 10 properties. 10 other homes were still moving last night. Incredible to see this. The hillside started sliding into a canyon on Saturday. A city official said that everyone was surprised because it's not near the coast. Now, the cause is still being investigated today. The White House is taking some steps to combat fentanyl laced with the animal tranquilizer xylazine, the combination deadlier than fentanyl alone. Nearly 11% of the more than 100,000 U.S. overdose deaths in the past year involve xylazine, and officials say they'll work to make it test strips available to expand data collection and track the drug's source and also ramp up harm reduction treatment. The Marine Corps is without a Senate-confirmed leader for the first time since 1910, now that General David Berger has stepped down. Republican Senator Tommy Tuberville of Alabama stalling senior military nominations in protest of a DOD abortion policy. Assistant Commandant General Eric Smith has been nominated for the job, but can only serve as the acting commandant until he's confirmed. A Tennessee man left his phone at a pizza parlor, and the attempt to return it uncovered a sexual predator that was preying on young boys in Franklin, Tennessee. And we want to warn you, some of the details of the story you might find disturbing. Here's the National Desk's Amanda Chen explaining how this all came to light.
It was just a real busy night. You know, we were getting ready to close down.
Joshua LaRue ended his shift at Marco's when a customer gave him a phone that someone left behind. Wanting to figure out whose it was, he searched through the phone and found the unthinkable.
Mortified, astonished, disgusted, just trying to process, breathe and think.
LaRue immediately contacted the Franklin Police Department, where officers later identified the suspect as Camilo Hurtado Campos.
To know the extent of it, even more so than what I thought it was, is, like I said earlier, it's just heartbreaking.
In many of these photos, police say Campos recorded himself drugging and brutally raping unconscious boys between the ages of 9 and 17.
This is by far one of the most shocking and egregious child sex cases that our department has seen.
Detectives found 10 videos of victims on that phone. In those videos, detectives say the children who were assaulted were so unconscious they may not know what happened to them.
As a 2.5-decade police officer here at Franklin, and as being a dad for about as long, this case and the contents and what's been described to me is so disheartening to think that what happened to kids in our community actually happened.
How did the suspect reach these victims? Police say Campos frequently went to nearby school playgrounds in the Hill Estates and Glass Lane area and approached kids to recruit them as players for his team.
You can do everything right as a parent and still have something terrible happen to your kid.
Lieutenant Charlie Warner's message for parents of victims: they're not to blame.
Coming up here on the National Desk, a new study showing students still struggling to catch up after the pandemic, what it'll take for them to get back on track. Then the government taking action against Bank of America for illegal activity, what they did and how much they'll have to repay customers. And later, how one state is using artificial intelligence, AI, to help fight fires. We're back in 90 seconds. HCA Healthcare confirming today a major hack has stolen the data of roughly 11 million patients across their network or hospitals and clinics in 21 states and the UK. Now, HCA says that some of the information was put on an online data breach forum. That stolen data includes information like patients' names and some contact information as well. The company says it does not include, however, clinical health information or other sensitive details like a credit card or social security numbers. Under the crisis in the classroom now, the education loss when schools transitioned to virtual learning due to the coronavirus lockdown in 2020 has not been corrected. This is according to the latest findings in a study by nonprofit academic assessment group NWEA. Using data of 6.7 million students, grades 3 through 8, the study found achievement gains throughout the 2022-2023 academic year failed to hit pre-pandemic levels. Only the youngest students outperformed projections, while the rest dipped further behind in both reading and math. NWEA's findings suggest that students across the board will need an additional 4 months of instruction just to catch up in reading and 4.5 months to catch up in math. There's a new boss at the CDC. Dr. Mandy Cohen greeted employees today at the Atlanta headquarters. She's a former North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services secretary and previously worked in the Obama administration. She replaces former director, Dr. Rochelle Walensky, who just recently stepped down. And we're just learning about some layoffs in Meta's misinformation unit focused on elections. The layoffs happened last fall and this spring, but Meta didn't say how many people were let go. A spokesperson said that protecting the 2024 elections is a priority. This news coming as signups surge on Meta's new Threads app. Amazon Prime Day kicking off today. This year, the retailers joining in this summer sales blitz. But will these sales get consumers to spend more money? The National Desk's Angela Brown looks inside the numbers.
If you look at the latest consumer spending numbers, it tells the story, increasing by only 0.1% in May. And then there's this. A survey released in June from CNBC and Morning Consult found 92% of Americans are pulling back on spending. Former Toys R Us CEO Jerry Storch from Storch Advisors says we are entering a challenging time for consumers.
Consumers are simply spending less on things, on goods. And when you inflation adjust retail sales, it's been 8 or 9 straight months that sales have been negative.
The summer sales extravaganza could reignite consumers. Companies like Walmart, Target, and Victoria's Secret are dropping sales to compete with Amazon Prime starting today.
It's also going to be a good time to save on tech, things like laptops and TVs. And I'm seeing a lot of activity in the beauty category as well.
Smart shopping expert Trey Bodge says if you're looking to cut corners on back to school shopping, now may be the time.
Take time to look for savings. Use deal sites to earn cash back and coupons. One that I like for this is called Coupon Cabin because it has both cash back offers and coupons.
But when it comes to spending, what are Americans buying? We're spending more on services like healthcare and air travel, but less on goods like cars. Economists expect spending to slow in the coming months as Americans start to pay back their student loans. In Washington, D.C., I'm Angela Brown.
Bank of America will have to pay more than $250 million in fines and restitutions. This as federal regulators found that the bank illegally double-dipped on fees, also withheld cash and points rewards on credit cards and opened accounts without customer consent. Bank of America must now pay $100 million to customers it wronged and is also ordered to pay $90 million in penalties to the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau and $60 million to the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency. This is the 4th enforcement action against Bank of America for illegal activity in its consumer business in less than a decade. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, or NHTSA, is looking into whether passenger doors of 2020 and 2021 Ford Explorer trucks can open while the vehicle is driving. Their Office of Defects Investigation has received 116 unique complaints, resulting in at least 25 injuries. And depending on the findings, the agency could seek a recall. It would impact more than 340,000 vehicles. Microsoft landing a big win today, a federal judge declining to block its $69 billion takeover of the video game company Activision Blizzard. Regulators said the deal would harm competition. The Activision Blizzard CEO, however, said it would enable competition and help consumers and workers. The company's shares went up more than 11% today after that decision. And Microsoft cutting some more jobs after the start of the 2024 fiscal year. Now, it's not clear how many exactly, but it follows January's downsizing announcement that led to 10,000 layoffs. Today, a Michigan jury agrees that the handwritten document dated in 2014 found in singer Aretha Franklin's couch is a valid will and supersedes the handwritten will from the year 2010. This is a win for Keekalf Franklin, the singer's youngest son, who's now entitled to the singer's Bloomfield Hills home. Both wills said all 4 sons will share income from music and copyrights. An alert today from public health experts as new cases of malaria are reported here in the U.S. Well, so far they've been in Florida and Texas. Medical reporter Liz Bonas shares what's prompting some new concerns.
Hey there, everybody. This new malaria alert issued by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention after the first cases of malaria were acquired in the U.S. in decades. Prior to this, it wasn't unusual, infectious disease specialists say, to see a case, but you could link it to travel outside the country. Malaria is a disease caused by a parasite transmitted by the bite of an infected mosquito. Dr. Thomas Lamar told me he just had a case here at Ohio's Christ Hospital last week linked to travel outside the United States.
It's certainly concerning because this is a serious infectious disease that can cause real serious morbidity and mortality.
This CDC alert calls on healthcare providers to be on the lookout for the early symptoms of malaria. 7 to 10 days after infection, patients experience headache, nausea, vomiting, and fatigue.
Fortunately, the type of malaria that they've detected is called Plasmodium vivax, which is generally a milder form of malaria. It still can make people very ill, particularly if they've never had it before.
The danger, however, is that in areas where there's a high risk for infection, it often becomes dormant. So people traveling to the U.S. may not even know they have Vivax. If a mosquito bites them and then bites you.
Vivax also has the ability to lie dormant in the liver and can reactivate weeks, months, or even years later.
It is treatable with prescription medications, but for Vivax, 2 courses of treatment are needed.
So we give a treatment form for the red blood cell parasite, and then we have to give a second 2-week course to treat the ones that are dormant in the liver. We don't have to do that with every type of malaria, but it is effective.
Now, that treatment recommended immediately once a diagnosis is made. I'm medical reporter Liz Bonas. Back to you.
A Brown University student newspaper says the school's LGBTQ plus student population has doubled in the last decade. The paper administered a poll to students in the spring. Results now show that 38% of students do not identify as straight at the Rhode Island school. A fall 2010 poll said the same for about 14% of students. A February Gallup poll says nearly 20% of people aged 19 to 26 nationwide identify as LGBTQ plus. All right, Nisha, coming up here on the National Desk, a new program in one state is using artificial intelligence to help fight fires. We're going to tell you how that works right after this short break. The National Desk taking the pulse of America, and we start with a trial program to detect fires using AI in California.
CAL FIRE announced they're partnering with UC San Diego's Alert California program to use AI or artificial intelligence. They say it's going to play a huge role in catching fires early. Little blue arrows represent more than 1,000 cameras positioned throughout the state. They say it's basically a round-the-clock surveillance system that helps them monitor fires even in remote areas. New AI technology will help scan for any abnormalities within the camera feed. If it catches anything like smoke, for example, it'll notify first responders.
Gun violence awareness hitting the road. Families of victims from the Uvalde, Santa Fe, and Parkland school shootings stopped at the Texas state capitol on a cross-country bus tour aimed at getting lawmakers' attention. 17-year-old Joaquin Oliver, also known as Guac, was one of many who lost their lives in the Parkland high school shooting in Florida. He is the driving force behind this tour.
Anyone that is questioning, but what do you want? I want the whole country to be offended by what is happening here. A first world country that thinks that this is normal.
The parents are demanding more action to prevent gun violence.
I did raise a little bit, but it really hasn't been enough.
These days, restaurant owner Pepe Tamez says he spends more and makes less, despite doing everything he can to lure his customers into his Mexican restaurant.
When I brought in the popcorn machine, people thought I was crazy.
With labor, rent, and utility costs also skyrocketing, he, along with many owners, have had to raise their menu prices to maintain operations.
It's outrageous.
Take a look at the most recent producer price index for all foods from the National Restaurant Association. The cost of food is down 2% in May, but it was up over 1% in March. With food prices all over the place, Tamez says breaking even is tough.
Still to come here on the National Desk, it's the Midsummer Classic as Major League Baseball highlights its biggest stars. But this year, it's all about the look and style before the game. We'll explain in 90 seconds. Check this out. Major League Baseball players strutting down a red carpet today at Seattle's famous Pike Place Market before tonight's All-Star game happening there. MLB highlighting its top players while aiming to appeal to younger fans. The NBA is currently holding the top spot when it comes to Gen Z's brand preferences. Now, as mentioned, the Midsummer Classic gets underway here in about an hour and a half as the National League and the American League play in the All-Star game at T-Mobile Park in Seattle. The American League leads the all-time head-to-head matchup 47-43 with two ties. Two-way megastar Shohei Ohtani will be batting second for the American League, but is not expected to pitch tonight. The first pitch will be shortly after 8 p.m. Eastern. That does it for us for right now. Join me tonight for the evening edition of the National Desk. You want to check your local listings for the exact time. I'm Eugene Ramirez. Thanks for watching. See you soon.